This is now example number 3. We are still going to have the same instructions: identify the vertex axis of symmetry, and your min or maximum value. And this is your equation: y is equal to x squared minus 4x minus 2. Now in the first two examples, we had it in vertex form. So for your steps over here, before we grab all those information over here, if your equation is not in vertex form, we need to complete the square so that we can transform it into vertex form. Okay, so the steps for this is, again, if this equation is not in vertex form, if not in vertex form, we need to complete the square so that it becomes the vertex form. Alright, most of us are already pretty good with the complete the square, so let's already start that. Let's grab that -4. We're going to divide it by 2, and that's going to be -2. Let's save that. Then we're going to square that. -2 times -2 is +4, so this is what we are going to add. Let's go rewrite that equation. Y is equal to x squared minus 4x plus 4. Remember, we have to balance the equations, so we added 4. We have to subtract 4. So we're going to subtract 4, and don't forget that -2 right over there. Okay, next steps, we are going to group these three terms over here and factor them. Y is equal to x. Now remember, what's the quicker way to get that number over here? It's going to be -2. Why is that? Because we followed that pattern last time. It's the same number. It's the same number after you divide it by 2. -2, -2. We'll put the square over here, and then let's simplify this. -4 minus 2 is -6. Voila! You have transformed the standard form over here into your vertex form. Now that we have this equation, we can grab our vertex axis of symmetry and our min or max value. So let's already do that. Your vertex is going to be 2, -6. Your axis of symmetry, x is equal to 2, because that is your x value over here. Now let's just take a look at your a value. Your a value is 1. Your a value is positive. So whenever your a value is positive, your parabola faces what? It faces up. Okay, when your parabola faces up, that means that your vertex is at the lowest point. So check again your example number 1, because it's pretty similar to that. If your parabola faces up, your vertex is at the lowest point of your parabola. That means that if we have the lowest point, if your vertex is at the lowest point, we're going to have a minimum value instead. So our minimum value is going to equal to -6. Where do you get that again? That is your y value of your vertex. So your vertex is 2, -6. Axis of symmetry, x is equal to 2. Your minimum value is -6 because your parabola faces up. Alright, this is example 4a. I'm going to have example 4a and 4b. 4b is optional. If you get example 4a, you do not have to view 4b. However, if you just need one more example just like 4a, then you can view 4b and take notes from there. Okay. Well, on the last example, we had it so that we had a positive over here, but this time we have a negative a value in front of the x squared. Now we're not used to this, but we are going to take some necessary steps first. So what we're going to first do is we are going to, if there is a value in front of the x squared, and this is in standard form right over here, we're going to factor out an a value from the first two terms only, from the first two terms only. I know previously, especially in example number 5, we factored it out from all of the 3 terms, but for these steps in example 4a, we need to factor out from the first 2 terms only. So this is -x squared plus 8x minus 13. So factor out a value from the first 2 terms only. Okay, what is your a value over here? Your a value is -1, so we're going to factor out or divide by -1 on this and this. So y is equal to negative, parentheses, a -1 divided by -1 is positive x squared. 8 divided by -1 is going to be -8x. Close that parentheses, minus 13. So it is a little bit weird, but instead of the whole 3, just like how we did before, we're only going to take these first 2 and factor out that a value over here. Now the next step is we're going to complete the square inside the parentheses. Okay, complete the square inside the parentheses. So let's do that. Let's just take that negative 8. So don't worry about this negative on the outside for now. Let's just take that negative 8 divided by 2 and square that. Negative 8 divided by 2 is negative 4. Let's keep that number. Negative 4 squared is equal to 16. So let's already rewrite that equation. Y is equal to negative parentheses x squared minus 8x plus 16. Now, this is going to be a little bit tricky, but let's just redistribute what we did. Did we really add a 16 in this equation? Now, let's redistribute that negative over here. So let's, this is going to be negative x squared. If we redistribute back inside over here, this is actually going to be a positive 8x. But if we redistribute this negative to the 16, did we actually add a 16? No, we actually added a negative 16. Now to balance this equation, we have to add 16. And don't forget that negative 13. Alright, it is a little bit confusing, huh? Let's just go back a couple steps a little bit. So you definitely understand this. A negative 8 divided by 2, it's negative 4. And when we square it, we add the 16. Okay, so we do add the 16 over here. And remember, we always have to balance the equation. But the reason why we added 16 to balance the equation is because when we redistribute it, when we redistribute the a value or the negative back into this equation, we didn't actually add a 16. We added a negative 16. So we placed a negative 16 over here. So to balance that equation, we have to add 16 because this is actually negative 16. So negative 16, to balance that, we have to add a positive 16. And don't forget that negative 13 over there. Okay, so the steps, let's go, let's write this over here. We need to redistribute that a value, redistribute the a value to the last term, redistribute the a value to the last term to see what you really added or subtracted. Okay, after you redistribute that a value, do the opposite outside the parentheses. So, and do the opposite outside the parentheses. So redistribute the a value to the last term to see what you really added and subtracted, and then once you see what you actually placed in that equation, do the opposite, but you have to do that outside the parentheses. So let's go over these steps one more time. Okay, we're going to factor out that a value from the first 2 terms only. The a value that we see is a negative 1. So we're going to divide negative 1 from these 2 terms. We have a negative 1 over here, parentheses. We're going to have x squared minus 8x. Close that parentheses. That negative 13 is still stationary over here. We're going to complete the square inside the parentheses. So we're going to divide by 2, negative 4, and then we're also going to square at 16. Complete the square inside. We're going to add that 16 inside the parentheses over here, but redistribute that a value back. We actually didn't add a 16. We actually placed a negative 16 in this equation. So since we placed a negative 16 over here, we have to do the opposite outside. That means that to balance the equation, we have to place a plus 16, a positive 16 in this equation, and don't forget that negative 13. Okay, from here on out, just factor y is equal to negative. This is going to be x minus 4 squared, and 16 minus 13, this is going to be plus 3. Alright, we have your vertex form, so let's already state our vertex, and that's going to be 4, 3. your axis of symmetry. That's going to be x is equal to 4. Now take a look at your a value. Your a value is -1. That means that it's negative, it faces down, your parabola faces down. That means that if it faces down, your vertex is it at your lowest point or is it at your highest point? It's going to be at your highest point. So take a look back at your example number 2 because it's very similar to that. Your vertex is at the highest point. Since it is, we're going to have a maximum value instead. Okay, max value, where are you going to get your max value? It is going to be your y value. So your max value is 3. Okay, so this is example 4a.